Hey guys, this is Guy195 here, reviewing a really awesome driver's aid. This is a car dash cam by Keeken, and I'm reviewing both the front and rear cam even though they are sold separately in this one video, just for simplicity because it's really not that much to review the rear cam. So the main reason why anyone would buy a dash cam, even though they cost maybe $100 to $200, is really for insurance purposes. So say you see something on the road and you want to confirm it, you have hard evidence right in front of you, especially if you were to say get your car vandalized or you got into an accident. This is a great way to show your insurance company the actual footage of what happened. So this review video will be very comprehensive. I'll be showing you how to set this up. I'll be going through the full details on how to use this camera, how you can get the footage out of it, and then give you my thoughts on what's great about it and what it could improve and whether it's worth your money. So if you saw my unboxing video, again, I'll be linking that in the description also at the end of this video, is that it doesn't come with an SD card, so you have to go and buy this on your own. I would recommend at least a 32GB storage size or bigger. So if you do have a Mac like I do, you want to make sure that you reformat the SD card for MS-DOS-FAT, as I'm showing you right now, that you just change the actual formatting on the SD card. That way your Mac is able to read the file. And then afterwards, you pop it in the camera, and the camera will ask you to reformat the card, and at that point just let it reformat it. And then you might want to double check before you actually start recording things on it, just to make sure that it has sufficient space on the card. Sometimes it does some weird partitioning thing, so you want to make sure that you're able to use the full capacity of your SD card. So once you got the SD card out of the way, you have to mount the camera. So I would first mount the front camera, since that's the main one that you have to hook up the rear camera to anyway. The rear camera itself doesn't have any kind of battery or power alignment source, so you have to actually hook it up to the front camera and then charge the front camera. So out of the box, it does have this adhesive aligner for the front camera where you can just kind of check up where you want to actually mount the mounting bracket for the front camera. But what I found is that because I wanted to mount it a little bit higher up on my windshield and it had a little bit of an uneven surface at that point, that the adhesive aligner didn't really work very well, so I just ended up kind of eyeballing it myself. So it's not too terrible to just get the mounting system on your windshield. The trick here is that you don't really want to have your car running, of course, throughout this whole process. It could take a while, but instead hook it up to a power bank. That way you can remotely power your camera so you can have a good view on it to see if the position that you have for your front camera properly gives you a good viewing angle for the front of your car. The one thing I did notice, even though this is a 3M adhesive, is that when it gets to particularly hot weathers, the glue actually starts to wear off. And I found that many times I found my camera just hanging there because it wasn't properly glued on. So I ended up having to get some super glue to glue back the adhesive to the mounting system. And afterwards, I haven't had any problems afterwards. So maybe at this point, you might want to try and adding some super glue now so you can prevent this from happening in the future. Alright, so now that you got the front camera managed to mount it, let's go ahead and mount the rear camera. So the rear camera is a lot easier to mount, but the main thing is that it's a little bit difficult to see. The only way to see what the rear camera is seeing is to have it hooked up to the front camera and have the front camera powered on. So again, have the power bank attached to the front camera so you can clearly see what the back camera is viewing. And then once you get your sweet spot, go ahead and just mount it to the back of your window, and then you should be good to go. So in terms of the cable management, I had to go out and buy these little cable management clips, which I did a whole nother video on, and they're really cheap. They're cost maybe around $6-7, and you come in a pack of like 50 or something like that. So I just used this to stick it all over my dashboard and throughout my car to help manage the cable. And then for the upholstery part where the ceiling is made out of fabric, I used some Velcro strips. So basically what I did is I bought some Velcro and I stuck it onto the back of these adhesive clips, and then just go ahead and stick it on the upholsteries to help manage my cables on the ceiling. I don't want to go too much in detail on how I set up my cable management because it's going to vary per car, but ideally you just want to make it as simple as possible and make it more discreet so it won't be in the way. So once you have both of the cameras securely mounted, also make sure that your front camera is able to be easily removable because you're going to have to remove it to access the SD card later on. So make sure you have room for the cables and all that. And then at this point, you can plug in all the cables. So plug in the power cable for the front, and if you haven't already, plug in the rear camera cable. And then you can go ahead and plug it into the auxiliary power port in your car. You can go ahead and turn on your car just to see if it works out. If it has a green light flashing up here, that means it's receiving power, and the red blinking dot here means that it's recording. What I do like about the design is that it's pretty discreet. Just looking at it from the exterior of your car, it's not really easy to tell that you have a camera set up, which I think is definitely a good thing. Okay, so now let's talk about the exterior of the camera, at least the front-facing camera first. So you have a pivotable lens, so you can get it to angle which way you want, just with this little turn dial on the side. And then next to that, on the same side, we also have the power button if you didn't want to have it activated at first, and next to that is a little induced reset button for the whole camera if you really need to reset it to factory defaults. And then on the other side we have all the ports. So starting from the left is the AV port, so you can hook it up to your TV if you wanted to display it that way. Middle is the charging port, and to the right is where you would hook up the rear camera. On the side is the slot for the micro SD. And then we have the front part where you have 4 main buttons where you can use for navigation and to access the menu. The hardware on the rear camera is much simpler. You simply have this pivotal portion that you can pivot the lens up or down, and then that's pretty much it besides the mounting bracket. And of course you can only view what the back camera is viewing on the front camera screen. So once you plug it in, if you press the right arrow key on the front camera, then you can switch between the different viewing modes. You can have it just have the front camera view, just have the back camera view, and also have the picture-in-picture with the back camera view inside the front camera view. So with everything plugged in and powered on, you're first greeted with the recording screen. As usual, if you see the red dot blinking, that means you are currently recording. And then on the very bottom is the date and time of the recording, and the upper portion of the screen is the current recording session, and it will be counting up to the amount that you're time looping. And at the very bottom left corner you see a microphone icon. If you see a red symbol next to it, that means it's not recording audio, and you can easily turn it on and off by holding the left arrow key. However, holding the left arrow key for a short tap allows you to save a key footage to prevent it from being overridden. That way you can look back to it if that was a critical clip. And then if you press the right arrow key, you can switch between the 3 viewing screens if you had the rear camera attached. And finally, the OK button on the recording screen allows you to pause or play recordings. So talking about just recording in general, let's go ahead and take a look at the menus. I'm not going to go over everything because this video is already long as is. So one key thing to know about the resolution is that if you have the rear camera hooked up, that means the only resolution setting you're able to pick is 1080p for both of them. So even though the front camera can theoretically record at 4K, the only option you can pick when you have both cameras set up is 1080p. So it's a little bit misleading when they say it's 4K, but if you wanted to only record with the front camera, then you can have a resolution up to 4K at 30 frames per second. So to access all these settings, you need to press the menu key, but first you need to make sure that the camera isn't recording. So to do so, just press the OK button, make sure that there's no blinking red circle, and then you can see that the menu is divided up into 2 separate screens. So the first screen with the camera symbol is mainly for recording properties, such as the resolution and also the looping capabilities. There's also other settings you can tweak for video recording, like exposure, white dynamic range, whether you want to have gravity sensing on and whether how sensitive you want that to be, motion sensitivity, you want to record audio or not, and whether or not you want to have the date stamped onto your footage. And then moving on to the next menu, you may have to double click the menu button several times to get to the second menu, but once you do so, this is where you have the ability to change more of the formatting things for the camera itself, so things like date and time, and also for formatting the SD card, the operating language, and the sound of the buttons. So with the technical stuff out of the way, let's talk about the actual footage quality. So even though the resolution is HD, the actual color saturation and detail isn't particularly great. And from playing around with different settings, I still found that the pictures still looked a little bit more washed out. So video quality is just kind of so-so in bright daylight. You kind of just forget about it at nighttime. It doesn't have infrared or anything like that to make sure that the detail is there at night. Another thing I want to point out is the fact that the microphone is only on the front camera. So yes, the rear camera will still record audio, but the audio is actually going to be exactly the same as the front camera because there's no extra microphone just for the rear camera. Then in terms of accessing the footage and how all of the files are organized, so to access your files, you firstly have to remove the micro SD card from the camera, and then to actually read it on your computer, you're going to have an appropriate adapter. I do recommend this particular adapter here. I'll have the link in the description where you guys can pick it up. It's real cheap, it's really effective. So seeing it on your actual computer, the files are organized. Basically, you have a folder for the save footage, and then in another folder, you have all the other footage that is already been looped and haven't been permanently saved. So they are organized by dates. You can see that it's just a string of numbers, but the first few numbers are the date, and then it's separated, and then you have the time down to the second, so you can kind of keep track of which footage came first. And then if you have both cameras switched on, and then you have the footage that ends with A, and you have the footage that ends with B. So A stands for the front camera, B stands for the rear camera. And the weird thing is that it saves it in a .ts ending file, and there's no way to change it on the camera settings to record it in a more common format like MP4 or MOV. So I had to actually convert the footage that I had on the camera into one of the formats just to import it into this video. So I kind of would have preferred that they had a better file management system. Now running through the other features that this dashcam has, for one thing, it advertises to have G-sensing, which is basically if it detects an impact, it would automatically save the clip. But as you can see here, I am banging on the camera both when it's off and also when it's on, but nowhere when I actually take a look at the file is the actual footage saved. So unfortunately, I think the G-sensing is pretty much a dud, but fortunately you can still save key footages by pressing that left arrow key. But do keep in mind that I found that the buttons were a little bit finicky and it doesn't work perfectly the first time you actually press it, so that's a little bit of a downside there too. And we also have a pretty decent wide angle front lens. It's about 140 degrees, so I think you're able to see definitely what's in front of you and a little bit to the side. And what's also really great is that it's pretty durable. I've had this since winter time, and now it's really hot in the summer, and it's able to stand up to those extreme weathers just fine. And I do like the dual camera setup, so a lot of times you might not be able to catch the license plate with just your front camera, so if you can see it coming up from behind you, that's a way for you to get that license plate right before that guy cuts you off like this annoying person. Missing, however, in its feature set is any kind of infrared night mode. So I mentioned before, the footage isn't particularly great when it's really dimly lit, and there's no speedometer gauge or anything, so if you want to use this check against a speeding camera, you can't really. And there's no GPS capability either for any location tracking. It depends on you if you really want this feature, but at the combined price tag of about $130, I can totally understand this omission. So final thoughts is I think this is a pretty good setup and a good price for both a rear and front facing camera with decent quality. For maybe about $50 to $80 more, you can get a couple more features like a speedometer, GPS, and maybe infrared night mode, but it's really up to you if you want to justify that price. But personally, I think this setup is actually quite a reasonable deal. As usual, put the product links to both the front and rear facing camera in the description box down below. Thank you for watching this video. If you found it helpful, please give it a like, it'd be greatly appreciated, and make sure to subscribe to my channel Skyforce95 if you haven't already to get more content like this. Or if you're watching this on Amazon, head over to my channel URL right here, or just search it up on YouTube Skyforce95. There you'll see a bunch of my product reviews and unboxings. Feel free to browse, or if you want to search for something specific, just hit that search field. That'll do it for this video. This is Skyforce95. Thanks for watching.